Looking at the facades of the houses, the village appears to follow a simple and perfectly ordered plan, but nothing could be further from the truth. Some of the houses in the village have evolved over centuries, developing highly complex configurations. Facades reveal little about what goes on behind them. Houses may overlap or intersect. They may conceal hidden courtyards, which open onto secret spaces, creating a whole urban landscape accessible only to the owner. There are cellars dug into the rock itself, for which stone was taken to build the house. The village of Saint-Nazaire is built on rock, both from necessity and utility. Building on less solid bases required the creation of foundations, a difficult and laborious process. In the Midi, builders often avoided the problem by building direct on the rock, using stone found on site. Saint-Nazaire is a village of stone effectively built onto its own quarry. In the 14th century, the villagers even succeeded in building a high wall around their settlement, over 5 metres high in some places. The challenge for subsequent generations was to make space within these walls for an expanding population. Expansion outside the wall only really began in the 19th century, with very few buildings located extramuros before this date. These included a hostelry, a yeoman's farm's residence, almost certainly within its own enclosure, and one further house. The barns built to serve the outermost fields were inhabited only by day labourers, tenants willing to accept the risks associated with living so far from the village. The owners of these barns generally lived in the town. The villagers themselves preferred to live within the city walls, behind gates which were closed when night fell. They mistrusted the night, with the risk of incursion by bandits, chicken thieves, outcasts, and other miscreants. Villagers only started building new houses outside of the wall in the 18th or even the 19th century, displaying a tendency widely encountered in the Languedoc and neighbouring regions. The rotation of the manor house, now occupied by farmers, marked this change in attitude towards the outside. The same shift can be seen in the creation of openings in the walls, means by which still more houses change their orientation to look outwards. Rather than follow the inward-looking pattern of previous centuries, in the 19th centuries the villagers began to look outwards, towards the roads and paths around the village. More and more houses were built outside of the fortified enclosure. Along the road and on the north, a second, more comfortable, more spacious village grew up alongside the existing settlement. Before the shift in mentality took place, however, all construction happened within the existing ramparts. No one was willing to accept the dangers associated with life outside the enclosure. In a space which had already reached saturation point by the end of the 14th century, the only way was to go up. Thus, a form of rural high-rise construction emerged, comparable to that encountered in towns under similar constraints. However, multi-storey buildings required a level of skill and investment rarely encountered in the village. Up until the 19th century, the standard dwelling was on a single level, with an additional loft space used for grain or hay storage. 2-storey buildings were the exception rather than the rule. Extensions were created by the use of andrones, which reached across streets, solving the problem of space while avoiding the need to add stories onto structures designed with a lower maximum height in mind. To extend upwards, the walls on the ground floor of the house need to be of a certain thickness, and in order to limit construction costs, the peasantry tended to limit these dimensions to the bare minimum required for a specific roof height. In other terms, the walls were not designed to support additional stories, and the inhabitants simply did not have the means to plan for this type of extension. The uncertainty inherent in agricultural production and a high dependency on climatic conditions meant that long-term planning was generally pointless. The andronne noted chamber in the 1631 register, indicating its purpose as sleeping quarters, was one of the few means of extending a house on a limited budget. In 1631, the andronne under which you are standing belonged to one Matthew Ligonetz, owner of the house to the west.